Hi, thank you so much for joining me in this edition of Clear Thinking Digest. So now I'd like to explore the question of the self. What is actually self? And I'd like to talk about this in relation to the importance of understanding how the sense of self affects everything that you do. Why it's important that you get a reasonable grasp of the self in order to order your life. Once you are born, your task becomes to understand the world around you. So you see children, they try to look at everything that is passing across. They try to understand everything that is happening around them. They're trying to make sense of what the hell is this reality all about. So, but when you progress and get to the ages of, let's say, 10, and you're entering into teenage years and then puberty, the task for you now becomes is to understand your place in the world. And that is why you see children, when they are born, they are very egocentric. They are very self-centered. They are selfish. So they think the world, they think they are the center of the world. That is why you see the constant crying and attention seeking from children, because they want everything to be surrounded around them. They want all attention to be on them. But once they start entering into circles, into social circles with other children, they now want to play with other children. They have now started to explore the social aspect of life. So they want to play with other children. And in order to successfully do that, they have to negotiate on how to play. Because if you are going to play with other children who is equally egocentric as you are, you have to find a common ground. You cannot want the whole world to be revolving around you, so you have to make a compromise. So in that stage, children now start exploring their social world other than themselves. Now, as this progresses, you enter into your mid-teenage years and you are about approaching adolescence. At that stage, what you're now looking at is to understand who you are within the face of the reality that is your environment. You're trying to craft a personal identity for yourself. And it's reasonable to posit this theory to say that this is true because it is during these years that the prefrontal cortex starts maturing and start getting to maturity. The prefrontal cortex doesn't even get to full maturity until around the ages of 20, 25, within those ranges, even 25, 26 to 27. The prefrontal cortex is still maturing. So that is why some scientists say that you don't get to a full adulthood until when you start hitting the ages of 25, 26 and all of that. So, and to a large extent, the sense of the self is really organized with the maturation of the prefrontal cortex, because that's where you start having the sense of agency, of execution, of rational thinking and all of that. Do you understand? So once that part of the brain starts maturing, then children or young people now start trying to make sense of their self-identity. Now that is where the question of self becomes a very important question, and it is during these years that the most successful people in the world, those who actually explore the sense of the self very effectively, become successful, and those who don't actually, who get meshed into social consciousness, into collective norms, into social expectations, they lose their identity. Because if you are the type that grew up in, let's say, a heavily religious, sensitive environment, what that kind of environment does is that it tries to beat, because at the time when this part of your brain is evolving, and then you're trying to explore your sense of self-identity, your curiosity heightens. That is why young people are very curious. You understand? So the curiosity is linked with the search for self-identity. Self-identity is linked with curiosity, with a sense of curiosity, because you're trying to understand a lot of questions. What is happening in your body? Because that's equally the time when puberty is really ramping up. You're seeing a lot of sexual tensions coming up in your body. So what is happening in your body? Why do I feel this way when I stay with John? You know, you're also trying to explore, why is it my parents are trying to rain down on my freedom? Why can't I just go out there and do the things that I want to do on myself? So you're trying to figure out all of these things. These are questions. So there's a lot of questions and you're really curious. That is why young people during these ages, they try to explore, they try to enter into some kind of an adventure to understand what is happening in their environment, to understand who they are. Do you understand? So it's important for us to understand this. Now, if they find themselves in an environment that is densely religious and regulated, what happens is that it beats the curiosity out of them. And these people they form some kind of deformed sense of self. They become timid. Their personality becomes distorted. And you find out that these are the people who don't really make it when they become full adults, who don't become really successful, because they are timid, they have a lot of psychological issues they're struggling with, and they find it difficult to really fit into the society. But why is it important that young people actually explore these years of maturation and try to understand who they are in the midst of what is happening in the environment, in relation to their environment, in relation to their social environment, is because if they get it right, then they can become responsible people in the society. So philosophers of the past, have the oldest advice in the book, know thyself. But I don't think this is the case. I don't think we should actually strive to know thyself, because the question of knowing thyself is a very difficult question, because even the sense of, to a large extent, the study of psychology and neuroscience has shown that even the question of the sense of self is an illusion. So to a large extent, you can't really know an illusion, an elusive representation of a reality, because the self is a psychological drama. The way I define the sense of self, the sense of self comes from the psychological drama that your sophisticated biology has produced. To a large extent, the way we even understand the mind is that the mind is a manifestation of the neurological processes that are happening in your brain, the mental processes that are happening in your brain. That's what produces the mind. And the sense of self is a psychological drama that these neurobiological processes are present in. So the biology became so sophisticated that for it to continue to maintain the growth process, which is its ultimate aim, it has to produce a psychological drama that will maintain this growth process. And that is where the sense of self comes up. And then this is an illusion. So to what extent can you really understand an illusion? Because when I would talk about the factors and the elements that come in place to define the self, that make up the self, you would understand that the question of the self, it becomes even difficult to answer the question of who am I? It becomes increasingly difficult. So I think that instead of asking the question of trying to know thyself, because when you talk about knowing, it means a full apprehension of the reality of something. I don't believe that we can really know ourselves. What I believe is that what we should strive for is to understand the physics of the self. If you understand the physics of the self, it gives you the ability to be able to explore all the components and the elements and the structures that make up the self. So I define the physics of the self as the elements, the components, the characteristics, the realities that come into place to create the sense of self. So if you understand all of these factors and how they come into place to create this sense of self, to a large extent, you will be able to navigate your way through the world as against trying to understand who you really are. I think the pursuit to know yourself is a fool's errand, because you cannot really understand an illusion in and of itself.